Hello everybody, welcome to Deluxe Collectibles, and today we're going to be going over whether or not the Keepers and the Golems were underutilized in LEGO Ninjago Season 14 The Island. I wanted to discuss this because coming out of the season now, having seen all of the episodes, there were only a few minor complaints that I could kind of come up with, and I wanted to discuss some of them just to kind of lay out my thoughts and opinions on this and hear your thoughts and opinions as well, just so I can kind of come to a consensus of whether or not this really was any sort of issue within the season, or if it just kind of fits well within like the parameters of only having 4 episodes within the season, and of course that having limited time as well to kind of explore some of these new characters. So I wanted to go over this in a video, so beware, of course there's going to be full spoilers for the island. We're going to go through each of the episodes, see how they kind of implemented the Keepers and the Golems, and then decide at the end whether or not they were underutilized. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, so for the first episode of the island, there is actually no utilization of either the Golems or the Keepers. They're actually not involved in this episode in any way, so that was a little bit disappointing, I would say, but also it's understandable because you have to kick this off, you have to get the ninja to this island, and you gotta set up everything that they have to do, like they have to try to rescue Misako, Wu, and Clutch, of course, and then kind of just other things as well within the episode, kind of giving them all of their gear as well. Of course, we get to see a bunch of stuff kind of utilized in this, the catamarans, all of the product placement basically within this first episode for the sets, so it's understandable why they're not included in this episode, and I don't see it as much of an issue, but still, it would have been nice to maybe see something from them. Then in the second episode is where we get the introduction for the Golems, and also the conclusion for them as well. The Golems are only involved in episode 2, which I have to say was a little bit disappointing considering you can get the Golems in one of the larger sets for the wave, and I know the wave's fairly small as well, but I thought that they were going to have a little bit more of an inclusion because they seem like a pretty powerful force, honestly, almost even more so than the Keepers, because these were like able to like shoot back their elemental blasts right at the ninja as well, and were kind of like just not affected by those by any means, so I found that quite interesting. Honestly, a really difficult foe to kind of fight against, and they don't even really wind up beating them within this episode. They kind of just wind up escaping from them, and I kind of thought that maybe like when Lloyd escaped, because they wind up following him because the other ninja split off, and then they wind up running into the Keepers later on, but the Golems wind up chasing Lloyd, and then Lloyd kind of winds up hiding with Twitchy Tim, and the way that they kind of leave it with the Golems kind of going away, I thought that maybe they were teasing that they could wind up coming back in some sort of sense, but they actually don't wind up reappearing at any point, so that was a bit disappointing, I would say, because I thought there was a lot of potential there. Of course, it's like a non-speaking character, so I can kind of see why there might have not been too much more that we could have gone over with this sort of like character, if you even want to call it that, but guardian basically of the island. But I thought they had some cool sort of abilities, and I think more could have been done with that, but I still really enjoyed the fight scene that was involved with them. I thought it had some great choreography to it, and I thought it gave each ninja a time to like sort of shine within the fight, so I liked it for that reasoning there, but still, I think it would have been cool to see them reappear in another episode. Then for the Keepers within episode 2, they actually show up right at the end of the episode. It's after the ninja, at least the main ninja, not including Lloyd of course, because he goes off on his own, but the other ninja have basically crossed over this bridge, and then they're kind of deciding what they're going to do, if they're going to try to go find Misako and Wu, how they're going to do that without Lloyd as well, or if they're going to have to go try to search for him. But while they're doing this, they wind up getting basically tasered by these Keepers, of course, and then the Keepers wind up strapping them onto a catamaran and taking them to a separate part of the island where it's basically their sort of hideout and base that they have, and that's where we kind of get the full introduction to, of course, like Chief Mammotus, which I have to say, correct me if I'm wrong about this because I really do want to know, but I don't think we ever hear them say like Chief Mammotus. I think he's never really referred to, maybe as the chief at one point, but I can't remember specifically if we actually hear like Chief Mammotus and the pronunciation of that. that. So I'm not too sure what went on with that, but it kind of just shows a little bit of underdevelopment, I would say, if I'm correct about that, with the characters here. Of course, the chief is kind of the main one to get the most attention here, and I did find the keepers to be interesting. Of course, I love their designs as well. I think it's so creative how they have the lightning sort of like flowing through them, or the electricity. It's just very cool. I like that little detail there, and I like the sort of like lore surrounding the amulet as well, that this was kind of given to them by, of course, the first Spinjitzu master to kind of protect it as well, and then that involves Wojira also. So there's quite a bit of cool involvement there with like the first Spinjitzu master expanding the lore of Ninjago, and I always like to see that. But just for within this episode, I don't really feel like they got too much involvement in it, of course, and they don't even really get to fight the ninja as well, because they just wind up ambushing them and then capturing them and bringing them here to kind of just let them know what's going on here on the island and that they are trespassing. So just kind of your standard stuff. I didn't feel like there was anything too exciting in this episode, so let's go on to episode 3. Alright, so for the third episode, I would say this is when the keepers get the most time to shine within the season, I would say. They get a little bit in the fourth episode, but of course we'll get to that later on. But basically, it opens up, of course, where we left off previously, with them kind of like arguing here with the keepers, or the keepers kind of informing them that they're trespassing, and then they let them know that they're going to have to take a sacrifice, basically, or a gift, I suppose, to Wojira. And then it winds up being Jay who kind of gets the one who's volunteered for this, because he winds up speaking out like, hey, come on guys, I think we can work this out. And then of course, like, the chief is basically just like, yeah, no, I think we're gonna take you as the gift of Jay, which of course gives Jay the wrong idea about that, because he thinks they're just gonna basically pamper him throughout the episode, and that does happen for a little bit of it, but of course the end of it is not as good for him. But then we get to see the other ninja other than Jay, of course, wind up getting locked up, and then they're with Misako and Wu as well, and that's a small involvement there, of course, of them locking them up here, but we don't really get to see too much more there. And then we get to meet Polaric, who, once again, another keeper who we never get to hear the name of, at least from what I can remember, like actually said within the episode. So I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's the two-headed keeper here. And I thought that this character had a lot that they could have done with him. I think that there could have been some cool comedic moments here with, of course, the two different like personalities with each of the heads here, but I felt like it was just such a small moment. There wasn't too much that you could really do with it. It was still a little bit funny with Polaric kind of misunderstanding Jay here, because Jay, of course, is very confused, and he just thinks, oh, you guys saw me using my elemental powers of lightning, so it makes sense why you'd want me to be your sort of like king, but I don't think I can do that. I have a full-time job as a ninja, so I don't think I'd have time for that. But that's kind of the small moment that we get with Polaric there, so there isn't too much to it, but it was still nice, of course, to kind of see the character and see them get a one-on-one moment with one of the ninja as well, so I do appreciate that. So after the scene with Jay and Polaric, then we cut to Lloyd, who of course is now off on his own, but he winds up running across Zippy, and then they wind up teaming up basically to kind of go up against some of these keepers to, of course, be able to release the other ninja, Misako and Wu, from the prison. So they wind up kind of teaming up there, and it gives another cool moment to kind of have some more sort of confrontations with the keepers here. Of course, it's more so on Zippy's part, and he's just kind of blowing right through them. So I thought that was a pretty cool scene. It was almost more so for Lloyd and Zippy, I think the cool parts were, but it was still good to have involvement to kind of going up against the keepers a little bit here, so I did enjoy that part of it, I would say. So I thought that was well done and a cool little scene and a fun one as well. And then afterwards, we have Clutch basically trying to steal the Storm Amulet here, and then we see that the ninja wind up getting captured because they're trying to convince Clutch basically that you shouldn't be doing this, we just gotta leave this for the keepers, it's their property of course, but then the keepers wind up getting the wrong idea here, thinking that they're in on it with Clutch to try to steal and take back this amulet, and they wind up all getting electrocuted and then put on the island, like on the shore basically, and then this is where they're kind of preparing the ceremony basically to send Jay out to sea to, of course, be fed to Wojira as a sacrifice. So, of course, very interesting there. This is probably one of the biggest moments that I would say the keepers get here. Of course, it's the whole sort of sacrifice scene here. Now, once again, there really isn't any fighting here because the ninja are already, like, not locked up, but they're tied up basically. So they're not able to do much here. So there isn't much action within the scene, but I still felt this scene was really well done. It honestly might be one of my favorite parts parts of the entire season. I thought it was just really, like, it made the stakes feel very high at this point, because whenever I'm watching Ninjago, I always have the feeling in the back of my head that basically, of course, all of the ninja are going to get out of this alright, but I felt like even though I thought that Jay was, of course, going to be alright, because we already know stuff about the future season of season 15, but I still was kind of on the edge of my seat a little bit, because I thought it was an intense moment. It had some good stakes to it as well. Jay seemed pretty worried also in the other ninja as well, so it was good for that reasoning there. So I would say it worked pretty well for that reason, but I think that it's still, even though it was involving the keepers, I didn't feel like they got to do as much. They were just kind of sending him off, so still a cool moment, I would say, for them, but it was still, I think I could have expected a little bit more from it. So now we're at episode 4 right here, and at the beginning of the episode is when the keepers finally get to have a confrontation with the ninja here, like a physical confrontation. So the ninja basically wind up breaking free, and then they're fighting against some of the keepers. The only thing is, it is a very fast scene. They basically just fight a few of them on this like little bridge going out to the sea, and they just wind up blasting right past the Chief Mammotus, of course, and he's kind of holding out like his staff, like he's going to like really get in a fight with them, but they kind of just wind up running past him, and he spins around in a circle and falls over. So it's not really too much that goes on there. I was kind of expecting something more, but I understand as well that the keepers are not really the actual villains of this season. They're kind of posed as the antagonists, but it winds up just being, of course, a misunderstanding between them and the ninjas. So it makes sense in the end, but still there wasn't really too much that went on there. And then we kind of see that the ninja, they try to save Jay, of course, and then they wind up washing up back on shore, and that's where they once again, of course, encounter the keepers, who are thinking like, what are you doing? Why were you trying to stop the sacrifice here? We need to do that to please Wojira. And then that's kind of when they get into explaining their backstory a little bit, which I did find quite interesting. We get to kind of learn how basically Wojira was supposed to be asleep for like another like 1,000 years or something of that, and then basically it wound up awakening a little bit earlier than expected. So they wound up sending basically the sacrifices to it of like gold and just gifts basically to Wojira to kind of please it and keep it away from like causing any sort of destruction, but then it keeps coming back even after they've run out of things to give to it. So that's why when the ninja arrive conveniently, they actually wind up deciding, of course, to give a human sacrifice or a human gift to Wojira. So that's kind of how they explain it, and we see that, of course, someone is behind this, kind of manipulating them, of course, and that kind of goes into more so just the total season, which I've already spoken about, of course, in my separate review for episode 4, but still, it was pretty interesting backstory, I would say. I was kind of hoping to get more so about, like, how they were passed down, like, this amulet from the first Spinjitzu Master. I think that would have been more interesting to see, but of course, I get it, they're on a limited amount of time, of course, so they're kind of focusing more on just what relates and pertains exactly to the story they're trying to tell in this finale. So I get what they were trying to do here, and I think it did work pretty well, and I think it gave some nice backstory for the keepers, and also another good moment for them as well. Now, a major complaint that I have here, and probably the largest complaint for the keepers here, is that the ninja wind up going to basically fight against these people who are behind Wojira, basically, and this whole sort of fake stunt that they're pulling off here to trick the keepers. But what didn't make sense to me was that the keepers, like, tell them the location to kind of go to so that the ninja know where to go to stop these criminals, but the keepers don't wind up going with them. They kind of just stay on the island, which I suppose I kind of understand, maybe more so even if they were a more peaceful sort of group, but they seem like they're pretty ready to fight. I mean, they have weapons and everything, so I thought they could have been involved with this, especially considering they just wind up fighting against, like, just random criminals here within this base, and then of course, like, Ronin as well, who turns out to be the main sort of, like, antagonist for the season. I hesitate to call him a villain, because I don't think he's really a full-on villain, more of an anti sort of, like, character just in general, but they wind up fighting against these people, and I feel like the keepers could have managed to help out a little bit. I wasn't asking for, like, anything too big, like individual moments for each keeper, but just to kind of have them join in, I thought it would have been kind of cool and made a lot more sense, but nonetheless, we don't get to see them involved in that fight, so I'm not going to focus on it too much. But then we get to see them at the end of the episode once they've recovered the amulet here, and they get a small moment between the chief and them where basically he apologizes, of course, for the misunderstanding and any harm that he might have caused by, of course, trapping them and like caging them and everything. So all of that is kind of cleared up, and then they have a small moment at the end where Clutch steals the amulet, and then they wind up having to go, and Nia just tasers him. So it's a pretty quick moment, but that's kind of all we get to see from the keepers here for this season. So I would say overall, honestly, I've been seeing a lot of people not really loving the island. I think there's a lot of people who are a little bit disappointed by it, and even by this video, you probably think that I'm in that boat, but honestly, I was really impressed by the island. I thought it did a great job with the minimal of 4 episodes. I think that's a very small amount of time that they have to cover a whole story here, and I thought they did a good job of kicking it off and also bringing it to completion as well. It didn't feel like there was anything left to kind of be finished. Of course, you have the small tease at the end for season 15 with Wojira, but of course that's a very small part of the episode in the final like minute of the episode, so it wasn't really anything too much. So I think they did a good job of cleaning up this story really well, giving each ninja a moment to shine, because there really wasn't a specific ninja for this season. Of course, you could argue Lloyd, but I think every ninja kind of gets their time to shine within this. So I would say that there was some pretty good involvement for everybody. I think the keepers, there could have been maybe a little bit more added for them to do, but I still think they did a good job of fulfilling their role. And of course, since they didn't wind up being the sort of main villains of the season, it made sense why there wasn't as many like physical confrontations between the ninja and them, because of course it just wound up being a bit more of a misunderstanding. So it makes sense in the end, and I would say I still really enjoyed their involvement within the season. I think they're really cool characters, and I think there could be potential maybe in the future to bring them back for something, or maybe if they start to more so explain like the first Spinjitzu Master, of course that could kind of relate with the history that they share. So I think there's a lot of potential there, but I'd say overall their involvement was pretty well done. I know I had a few complaints within this video, but that's kind of what it was all about, just to kind of address those. And I want to hear your thoughts and opinions on the keepers in the comment section down below. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on their involvement in the season, not even just your thoughts on the actual season, but just their involvement specifically within it. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on that, and thanks so much for checking out the video. If you did enjoy, it would be highly appreciated if you could leave a like, also subscribe as well if you would like to check out some of my other content. I did do reactions and reviews for every episode of season 14, so you can be sure to check that out. And just thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you all next time, and always remember, keep on collecting.